Welcome to the Daily Dharma, a gentle podcast where we read a philosophical story every week and reflect on how it relates to everyday life. Our focus is to use Buddhist philosophy to understand the complexity of modern life and find achievable and accessible pathways to peace and happiness. Hi everyone, welcome to the Daily Dharma. In this episode, we'll be talking about what it means to be profoundly lost and how we can find ourselves when this happens. The story that we'll be reflecting on this theme is called The Hike, and it is an original fable. Here is how the story goes. Once upon a time, there was an avid hiker called Takeshi. He loved to hike because it brought him closer to nature and helped him forget about the stresses of the modern world. Takeshi prepared meticulously for each hike. He would do research to find spots of interest and read reviews online on how enjoyable they were. He would ask his friends in the hiking community about the quality of the trail and whether or not he would have to look out for any tricky bends or turns. He would even drive ahead of time to spots just to see what the terrain and altitude were like so he could make sure that he had the right gear to comfortably hike at that location. One day, after scoping out a hiking spot for many weeks, Takeshi arrived and saw that the weather was not as predicted the day before. The forecast had said sun, but now it was cloudy. Nevertheless, Takeshi decided that he was adequately prepared for the hike and decided to forge ahead. After an hour, he realized that the terrain was much more rocky and challenging than expected. There were many more sharp cliffs and steep hills than he had initially realized. Still, Takeshi felt confident that he would be okay based on everything he had researched. Finally, he came around a certain bend and a mist descended around him. After a few minutes of walking, he completely lost visibility. At first, he was panicked. After all, he was alone in the woods, far from civilization, with weak to no reception to call for help. What was he to do? First, he realized that if he kept walking, he would risk falling off a cliff or a steep slope. So he slowed down his legs down to a full stop. He also observed that his thoughts were racing ahead to the worst outcomes and thought it would be better to slow them down as well. As an experienced hiker, he knew that panicking and being anxious would only drain his energy and make his senses less sharp. So he decided to bring his focus to the present, to the aching of his feet, the dampness of the mist, and the slowness of his breathing. In taking a breath and calming down, he realized that his current circumstances were simply a reflection of life. You can do absolutely everything you can to prepare for something, only for an unknown problem to stop you still in your tracks. He understood then that all you can do sometimes is to be still, calm, and peaceful, and wait patiently for the situation to pass. 20 minutes later, the weather got warmer and the mist lifted, clearing the way for Takeshi's hike. He ended up seeing a beautiful vista on his way down and getting back to his car before sundown. Later on in life, he would describe this hike to his friends as his most memorable one, not because it was an amazing experience, but rather an insightful one whose lesson he came back to many times in life. It reminded him that sometimes when you are truly and profoundly lost, as Takeshi was on his hike, the best thing to do is to be present and to be patient, and realize that with time, the direction you're looking for will come. This story is very much inspired by certain experiences I have in the present, as well as many moments I've had in my life where, just as Takeshi felt, surrounded by mist, with no visibility and no sense of direction, what you can do when this happens. And the funny thing is, when you feel lost, one of the most immediate and visceral experiences is to feel a deep sense of shame for that happening, because there really isn't anything that prepares you to be lost in life, more or less in society, and especially because of all the gadgets and the apps we have. We're more or less expected to figure it out and do so quickly, to be lost, to choose for one reason or another, or to be in necessity of completely stopping because you don't know which direction to go in, is almost a state that is simply not acceptable. Because why didn't you research more? Why don't you investigate? Why don't you try and figure it out? But just like in Takeshi's situation, where despite his research, despite his senses, he had no idea which direction to go in, life will always sometimes deal those kind of situations and cards to us as well, where despite the immense research and effort we put in, and trying to anticipate every kind of curveball, we miss something, and this completely stops us from doing what it is we set out to do. But in remembering that this is simply a normal part of life, instead of stigmatizing and feeling shame and frustration at ourselves for being lost, we can actually be present in this moment, give ourselves some comfort and support, and simply wait for some sort of sign and direction or change that will lead us in the right direction. I also feel as well that it is simply and especially when we feel profoundly lost and our gut or our mind is not really pointing to any specific direction, that we should actually stay still. This is a time where, for one reason or another, we need to stop, we need to rest, we need to recharge, and we need to wait for things to change a little bit and give us a little more information on where we need to go. in Takeshi's situation, had he decided to keep going, as often our modern day culture pushes us to do, to never give up, to keep walking, keep running, keep forging ahead, he actually could have risked injury because with the mist, he actually had no idea where he was going and he could have easily fallen down a slope or accidentally walked off a cliff. And I think this is actually very accurate of when we try to force a direction that doesn't feel right, or we try to do something simply because we are afraid of being lost. Sometimes the best thing in being lost is simply to just be okay with being lost and let ourselves fully focus on that experience and learning what that experience is trying to teach us. And of course, I would say many others struggle with this because we're conditioned to do the exact opposite. But in reminding ourselves that it's okay to be lost and in being okay with it, that's how we begin to find ourselves and to develop the patience we need to wait for that sense of direction. That's how we're truly found and we move forward in life without feeling as though we are continuing to be lost no matter what. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you have a beautiful, safe, and joyful week ahead of you. Until next week.